So lesson 3, everyday coding for business. We're going to focus today on sending emails automatically. And of course, we're going to focus, as always, on our sample menu because that just seems the easiest to do. So let me present. Okay, everybody remember the form that we built using our script? We had our menu. We created the scripts from that made the form. And then we created last week on lesson number 2, how to update that form whenever we make changes. In order to update the form, we added a trigger, which you can get from the current project triggers. I've deleted them right now because we don't need to update the form right now. But if you remember, we just created a new trigger on update the form every time the spreadsheet is changed. That's all it takes. The next thing we did is after creating our form, we had Melissa put in a response, and she ordered apple pie and applesauce. Oh no, she ordered applesauce and baked apples. And the last thing we did last lesson was send a very, very simple email to Melissa that was a jumbled mess of her information. And so that wasn't super fun for her as a customer ordering her apples to get a terrible email. So we need to learn, how do we not only send an email, but how do we make it friendly and legible and meaningful? So I don't expect you to remember from lesson number 2 how to do all these things. I am going to zoom in on the code because I got some comments last time that really helped to read. So in the chat box, can you simply tell me if you're able to read that code, if it's zoomed in enough? Dan says it's fine. If Dan can see it, everybody can see it. Okay, so we went in and we have our order placed function. Remember, the function is like a mini program, and it tells us that we're going to open the form with the ID, crazy long string that ends in AUKG. Well, our form ends in AUKG for the ID. This is indeed the form. And so we have our form, and it goes in and it gets the responses to that form. And then it says the most recent response is all of the responses, but index number -1. Whatever the length of the response is, -1. So if there's 10 responses, we want index 9. That's why we use the -1 at the end. So that responses last index number, essentially is how you can say it in English, grabs that information. Once we have the most recent response to the form, we can get from it several important bits of information. Number 1, we can get who submitted the email or which email submitted off of the get respondent email. That allows us to create our variable of the email address we need. It allows us to get the items in that form, again, by getting the item responses off of response. And then it comes down here and we did a loop. And that loop says that for however many items there are, in this case there's only 2, we're going to get the title and we're going to get how many. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use our old friend logger log to see what we're actually pulling from that information. So I'm going to pull up here and I'm going to put logger log title, and I'm going to run the script order place. Save it, run it. When we go to view the logs, we can see that it pulls up the item responses that Melissa put in once it comes up. A little bit slow today. There we go. So These are all the items that Melissa ordered. Now, the important thing to know is each one of these has a timestamp of when the log was generated. You can pretty much ignore those timestamps, other than you can see it actually takes a few milliseconds in here, roughly 80 milliseconds every time to run through and pull that information. Now, when Melissa got the email last week, if you recall, it sent it sort of all jumbled together, and it wasn't very legible and it wasn't very useful. And part of that is because those titles include everything in this title of the form item. So it has the item itself, it has the price, and then it has the question, how many do you want? Now, as a customer, Melissa probably doesn't want to know the question of how many do you want. What she wants to know is she ordered how many apple pies and how much. Now, part of that script is also the how many question, and that's the response. Now, how many, in this case, ties directly because I ask, how many do you want? But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to name it that. You might name it simply answer or option or anything you want it to be. And so we can go through and we can actually see her responses. Again, we're going to just run a logger log on how many and run it. And that will tell us not only what question she was answering, it'll give us the answer to the question. So we view our logs, and it says applesauce, she wanted 5. Baked apples, she wanted 8. Cabbage, she left empty. Frog legs, she left empty. Fruit and season was empty, and roast veal was empty. So all of those are 0. So she really only ordered those 2. So notice the next question down here was an if statement. And we put that if statement because of those empty titles. When it said we want roast veal and it didn't have any number there, but it still included the title, we need a way to strip out those empty questions that she didn't actually say she wanted, because sometimes the form believes that she put nothing as an answer or 0. So the way to do that is we ask if the value of how many is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, meaning they actually ordered a number of that item, then we're pushing into our array of order the title and how many. That gives us that end result. I'm going to go ahead, and I apologize for this, Melissa. We're going to send you that email. And pull up that email that was just sent to you. Okay, and I need this drug in here so you can see it. So this was what was sent to Melissa. Notice that all it has is each item separated by a comma, because this is an array. All it's doing is pushing the item, pushing the amount, and then the next item and the next amount. So it's not very user-friendly, and we want it to be customer-friendly, obviously, or user-friendly. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in there, and we need to think, how do we make that order appear at least on individual rows so that they're more legible? So this is one of the steps you'll want to learn. This is an important one, and it's called a non-printable character. So when we go back to our order, that order array is what generated this comma-separated array. I need to zoom in on that. I just realized that might be small too. So that comma-separated array was generated by pushing the title and how many into the array. Well, we can add a non-printable character in there fairly easily simply by adding the code for a new line. \n means new line in raw text computer language. And so what that does, when we run it now, it's going to send a very different email to Melissa. There we are. Am I back? I hope. Okay, I'm back. Very good.
We're gonna have to wait for everybody else because everybody else got out.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck. The internet just died.
About this time every day it does.
That's real frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
That's real frustrating. I do not like that.
Yeah,
I would like that to not happen again.
Every day about this time. And that email did not go through.
Yeah, because it didn't run because it wasn't connected to the server.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and run it again. The internet.
Can't live with it, can't live without it.
There we go. Okay. So it just sent that email, and what it does is it simply adds that \n character as a string of text, adds a line return. That's sort of handy because that allows us to have a new line. So at least she knows that she wanted applesauce. How many do you want? She wants 5. Still not super user friendly, but it's certainly better than it was. Now we need to think about how can I make it pretty? So let's go back. And the first thing we need to think about is how do I take the title? And remember the title is this full string of characters, apple pie, $412, how many do you want? And how do I turn that into something pretty? So I'm going to turn off sending Melissa email after email for a while. And we're going to look at the title. When we run that script, and it spits out the log of that item, we need a way to tell the computer to look at that sentence or that string of text and break it apart into parts we want. So in here, we know that the name of the product, no matter what, is always followed by the price. Now, conveniently enough, this is our menu. So we built it and we know that the $sign that is before the price only appears in the price. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the data. So what that means we can do is tell the script to find everything up until it finds $sign. And amazingly enough, there is a JavaScript function that helps us do this. So And I'm going to send you the link to that right now through the chat box. And this is not unique to JavaScript. This is actually a very common programming method. It's called index of. So I am sending it through the chat box eventually, if I can paste it there. And now you'll have the link to the index of information. So what we want to do is we want to find the title, but we want to get just the part that is the food. So we're going to create a new variable and we're going to call it food. And we need to somehow strip everything else off except for the name of the food. So we know that we're going to look for the $sign. Zoom in on that for you. We're going to look for the $sign, and we know we want everything up until the $sign. So we're going to take our title and we're going to slice it. So I'm going to put in the chat box how to slice. Or the documentation on slice, I should say. Got that. And there's how to slice. Okay, so slice is sort of how it sounds. You're going to take a string, in this case the title of the form question, and we're going to slice it. We're going to cut it up. Now, it uses index numbers to identify where it wants to start and where it wants to end. If you go to the documentation on slice, you will find that it does not, it includes the first index, but not the last index in that format. So a way to do it, and I'm just going to copy their example. This is not a useful scenario for us right now. I'm just showing you what the documentation shows. Allows you to slice from index 4 up until index 19, but not including 19. So we know we want to start with index 0 because in our title of apple pie 412, how many do you want? A is index 0. This P is index 1. This one's index 2, index 3, index 4, index 5, index 6, index 7, index 8, index 9, index 10. So if I slice it from index 0 to index 10, it would not include the $sign, but it would include, everything before the $sign. So let's try that. So we're going to slice it. And we're going to replace logging the title with logging the food and see what it does. We're running it. Oh, grab that log. You think of a string as a literal piece of twine, and you can slice it up into different segments of your twine. And this is what we're doing to that text string. Now, notice up here, it didn't quite work because I obviously can't count. I should have put 11 instead of 10. You can laugh at me for not counting correctly.
We did.
Good. Pull up the log. And you'll notice it did really good for applesauce, but what did it do to the other food? Applesauce looks perfect. Baked apple was baked apples, and it just cut off the S. Cabbage, it includes the $sign number 4. Frog legs, it includes the $sign. Roast veal happens to work as well. So if we knew our menu character count was always going to be 10, it would work just fine. But it's not. And so we need a way to tell the computer to do some figuring out for us. And so that's where index of comes in. We're going to replace 11 with a mini function. So we do that with the parentheses, and we're going to say that we need to get the index number in title, index of, and we need to find the dollar sign, because the dollar sign is right after the title every single time. And so what that's doing is this mini function right here is taking title, the string, and it's finding the index number of this character inside the quotes. So now if we run it, it should go through and slice from the very beginning of the string until the index of dollar sign every single time. And amazingly enough, every single one is perfect in what it says it is. Now you'll notice it includes the space after the dollars or before the dollar sign, but not the dollar sign. So we don't want to include that space because it'll make it hard to write our email. So we can simply go in there and subtract 1. And it will get rid of that empty space after the string. So now when we view our logs, as long as the internet stays working today. Now when we view it, you can see that there's no more highlight after the word. There is no space after the food name. It exactly cuts it out. What that means is that understanding the use of index of and slice means we can take almost any text we want and figure it out mathematically to get the information we want. So let's reverse that thinking, and we'll call an amount. And that's going to be the same idea. It's going to be title slice. We're going to take the title of the item. We're going to slice it. But this time, instead of starting at 0, we want to include the dollar sign. So we're going to take that index of mini function. We're going to get rid of the -1 because we actually want to start with the dollar sign. And then we need to get however many it is. Now this one's a little bit trickier because we don't have any special code after the dollar sign to know what if this was 1545. We can't count, so we need another method to look at how it's going to be. And amazingly enough, we can use how. And so what that means is we're going to tell it the index to end on. And I'm a firm believer in copying and pasting code to save yourself typing. Instead of looking for the dollar sign, we're going to look for how. And what that's telling us to is that it's going to slice up that string from where the index is of dollar sign to the index of how. Now it's probably a space off, but that's fine. We can fix that really easy. So we're going to log food plus the amount. Now I will tell you that I frequently put a space between my log items just for legibility amount. In this case, we can actually just put a slice or a / so you know that they're separate line items in your log. So let's go ahead and save it and run it. 75, I missed an extra something. What did I miss? Oh, I missed closing out our brackets. Okay, there we are. Remember, if you have an error, look at your brackets. You probably missed one, which I just did. Okay, let's look at our log now. We've sliced our title strings up into 2 segments now, the food and the amount. Okay, we now have the price for each one. Now remember, I didn't want the space after there, and it was just like I said, there was going to be an extra space, remember? So the trick to get rid of the extra space is use the -1 after the index. So we're going to subtract 1. Now, the reality is I want to do math on those food amounts based on how many they ordered. If I try and do math including the dollar sign, it's not going to work. So I need to change that and get rid of the dollar sign by adding +1. So now when we run the log, it should have the food amount and the number that equals the price without dollar sign and without extra spaces. Right? There's no extra hidden space there. Watch for hidden spaces. They will cause you nothing but heartache when you're trying to figure things out. Logs are your friend because it lets you see what the computer is doing. So now we know the food and we know the amount. We don't need to read the log anymore, but now we need to figure out, okay, we don't want to push to the order the title, we want to push to the order food. We don't want to just list how many, we want to list how much too. So what we're going to do is we're going to add yet another string in there. So let's see, what should we call it? Oops, just killed all my characters. At, comma, and then we need to add the price, so the amount, and then our new line. Now down here, instead of bugging Melissa with that order, we're just going to log it. Because there's no reason to send Melissa that email until we're really ready. So now we're pushing to the order, the food, how many, at, amount, and a new line. Okay, so we have applesauce, 5, at, 220, and then a new line, baked apples. Now that's all well and fine, but it's still not super legible, and it doesn't tell us how much we're going to pay for our applesauce. So we need to do some math. And that is a mini function just begging to be done. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it from just an amount. We're going to add in another string for a total of, and then we're going to use the plus sign to combine the information, just like we did in log before, where we had food plus the backslash and amount. We're going to add the plus sign, and this time we're going to make a mini function of how many times amount. Now, it needs a dollar sign before there, and it needs a dollar sign before the amount, because we took it out before. When we view our log now, what we've done is we've stripped that out, and we've gathered our totals. We have applesauce, 5 at $2.20 for a total of $11. Baked apples, 8 at $5.45 for a total of $43.60. Now, if you remember, that rounding of the decimal is always an issue, so we have to do what to it? Does anybody remember? It's in the chat box. And we used it up earlier before. Does anybody remember the to fixed option? So what we're going to do is we're going to add that to our amount, but we need to enclose it in yet another mini function. And the same thing with our amount. And we need to enclose it in a mini function. The reason we enclose it in mini functions is so that it's calculated all by itself, so that it's not part of the whole row, it's just that amount. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that when we run that, oops, what did I, oh, God, I didn't grab the amount first. I just added the fixed to the raw string, and that's no good. Sometimes it doesn't believe you have a number. If it doesn't believe you a number, you can always do the times 1 trick, or you can declare it as a number by doing number. Honestly, the number doesn't always work, but the times 1 seems to almost always do the trick. So what do we got in logs? Okay, we have applesauce 5 at $2.20 for a total of $11, and baked apples at $5.45 for $43.60. So we've got our 2 fixed in place. Now, this is where I need you guys to chime in on the chat box or unmute yourself and speak. What do you see wrong if I send Melissa this as her email list? What wouldn't make sense to a customer at this point? Well, Dan, you've got it directly correct. It's all one string, meaning it's an array still, right? It's an array enclosed in these brackets, and it's separated by commas. Those commas don't make sense to normal people, right? So instead of adding to the array all these little things, we can get rid of those commas if we think about what a customer would want to read. So the customer might want to read something like, let's see, instead of food, how many, let's reverse that and put how many plus, and we can't have them just run together because they will if you don't add a space. So it's going to put how many of food, comma, we don't need that. We want to replace that with a plus sign because we're just making one really long string with everything in there that makes it proper English. So this might be 1 of apple slices at the amount. We have that math correctly. And then it has a comma here. We don't need that comma. We want to replace it with a plus sign. We don't need this comma. We want to replace it with a plus sign for a total of blank amount, 2 fixed, comma, and let's get rid of that and make that a plus sign. So now, when we run that, it should be much more pleasant to read for a customer. 5 applesauce at $2.20 for a total of $11. 8 baked apples at $5.45 for a total of $43.60. Now that makes a little bit more sense, doesn't it? Right? So let's think about, there's one last thing. This is still an array, and even though it has 1 string and 2 string, it's still separated by a comma. Now, arrays are great because using that push tool, we can build whatever information we want, but we really want it to look more like a table for their people. So we can go in there and we can do a neat little trick. We're going to first sort the order. Now, this one happens to already be alphabetical, but what if they're not? Simply sorting it's going to alphabetize it by the number of the items they ordered, because that first question is how many. So it'll identify it by how many of whatever item they did. The next thing we can do, and I'm going to send you the link for this as well, is called join. There. And I'm punching this into the chat box right now. So we're going to take our order and we're going to join the order or join the array. And notice that as we pop it up with the period, it tells us we can join or we can join with a string separator. A string separator is a comma in the normal array, but we want to change that something to something that makes more sense. So what we want to replace it with is maybe a non-printing character of a new line. And then we're going to log it after the sorting and the joining. So let's go ahead and run it. And what we have in the logs now looks a lot more like what a real email should be. Why did it log it twice? Did I just have it in the wrong thing? Or did it not save? Oh, I did have it logged twice. That's why. Okay. So let's run that again with the extra logger removed. And we're going to name that variable final order. And see what it looks like now. Again, ignoring the timestamp in the logs because only we see those timestamps. The customer doesn't see the log timestamp unless we tell it to, which would be crazy. So it is still, oh, because I just logged the wrong thing. I didn't log final order, I logged order. There we are. Notice the brackets are gone. It's no longer an array. And now it has, did I type N8? Oh, I forgot the backslash.
I was just going to ask you if there was a backslash in that.
You can call me when I make typos. It's great. I appreciate when students catch my error. It's awesome. Plus, it saves other people from making the same mistake because they're like trying to copy exactly what I do and I forget to put the backslash and it's wrong. There we are. Now we got our space. So this looks a lot more like what it should be. What we can do is now we have our final order. Let's think about how we turn that into an email. We already remember from before that we use mail app and the send email function. So send email allows us to put in the recipient who we're going to send the email to, and we get that from the response, get responded email. We put the order. Now, it might be nice if there was a date there, right, for when they placed the order. So we could get that by adding a new variable, and we'll call it timestamp. And amazingly enough, when you hit period after response, one of these, get timestamp, allows us to know when they submitted the order. Now, timestamp by itself, we could just add, and that would be totally valid. However, then we would see the timestamp just like in the logs, which is not necessarily the most user-friendly. So we need to take that date object of timestamp and turn it into something pretty. So first, we're going to tell it that it's a date by telling it that timestamp is a new date based on response get timestamp. Then that means down here we can use a mini function. And around timestamp, we're going to add a utilities. This is one of those crazy Google-only things, utilities.formatDate. And it says we need a date. Well, we know the date is timestamp. It needs a time zone. The time zone is going to be, in this case, Pacific Standard Time. And the format. The format, we're going to put month, day, and then we're going to put year. That format is month, day, and year. And then we're going to put in not order, but we're going to put in final order for the actual order. So our mini function of utilities format date should turn the timestamp into a month, day, year format, and then the final order. Now up here, we probably ought to put something more cordial, if you will. So we're going to say, let's add email, and we want to put in a couple of line breaks. So we do the \n+, plus final order, and we're going to say it will be ready in 20 minutes. I'm not your restaurant, so I don't know. But we're going to add another line break, and we're going to add your order will be ready in 20 minutes. Okay, now notice that starts to get really long and goes off the screen a little bit. Anywhere that there's a plus sign, you can break. So we can just hit enter there, and then it's all legible on one screen. So Melissa, are you ready to get your fancy email now?
Yeah, but one question first. Are you wanting to put 3 M's in your date, like your month, date, and year?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I'm going to teach you how to figure out what you want to put there. We're going to go to resources. Dan, why do you say it's not going to work? We're going to go to help and then documentation. This is the Google Apps Script documentation location. Under reference, we're going to go down to utilities format. Admittedly, there's no way for you to know that it's under script service. It really is. It's just it's clear down in script app, and you're never going to find it otherwise. And I'm sorry. The way to get around that is to come up. Utilities. Come into here, utilities, and pull up the link for format date. And then it has this crazy link at Oracle. You follow the crazy link at Oracle, and it gives you simple date format. And it has examples further down. So for example, if we wanted to say Wednesday, July 4th of 01, it would be EEE MMMD, YY. We want it to be full year, so we have to put in year, just like that. And that I might have actually put as caps. I did. Dan was right. It wasn't going to run because I didn't put the years as correct.
Okay, but what about the caps and months? That's what I was asking.
Okay, so we go back to the format, and when you look at the example date and time pattern, how many M's are in there determine how it's going to appear in the result. So if you want a number month, you just put capital M, and it turns into, say, 07. If, however, you put MMM, then it turns it into 3-digit abbreviation of the month. If you put in 4 giant M's, you get the entire month spelled out.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
So I go to this reference a lot when I'm formatting dates because it can get crazy. It really can. So we're going to run it and send you your order. Go back to sent. Okay, right off the bat, what do you see wrong up here?
The wrong date. Wrong date?
No, that's the correct date. You placed that order on the 20th. That was last week. You placed the order then. Your timestamp was 4/20/20 at 4:54 p.m. What's missing? Does that make sense when everything's strung together?
The time that you ordered it. No. No.
Look right there. Should there be something between your order and the date?
A space.
A space. So, easy enough to do. You go back to your mail app script, and we're going to actually make it even prettier. On space. We're going to run that. And now, oh, how much more customer friendly is that? Your order placed on April 20th, 2020. M. Schuler, you ordered this, and you ordered that, and your order will be ready in 20 minutes. Now, the important thing to understand is that using this is actually fairly easy to do to create an email that on their end. Now, I don't have in here things like your order is as follows, or what else might be nice in there? I don't know. We hear you, Dan, when you type in the chat box, but not if you don't speak. You're on mute. So there's some.
Maybe thank you for your order.
Perfect. That's exactly the idea. So let's go ahead and let's first add a comma after the email. That's one of the things I noticed is it addresses the name, but it doesn't have the normal salutation of a comma. And then it doesn't have thank you for your order. So we can go in there and say, thank you for your order. Below is what we have, or what we are preparing for you. Now I put double N because it gets a little easier to read if it's double line breaks. That said, up here, I added a line break after each line, but I didn't need to because it already adds a line break when I joined it. So when we send Melissa that, she now gets this delightful, thank you for your order. Below is what we are preparing for you. 5 applesauce at $2.20 for a total of $11. 8 baked apples at $5.45 for a total of $43.60. Your order will be ready in 20 minutes.
Steve,
Yes.
the formatting of the date up above, when you have the date, a dash between the month and the day.
Yes.
Can you change that if you put a period between that? Because that's a more, or nothing, because it's not.
The best part is you can make it almost anything you want it to be.
Okay.
How's that?
Much better.
So that is pulled out of this simple date format link that you can get through the reference material. And as you can see in here, oops, tried to highlight the wrong screen. Probably big enough now. I don't know where I'm at. Oh, here we are. Okay. You can add the commas. You can have semicolons. You actually have to add semicolons, for example. You can put the, all sorts of things. Military time. You can add the o'clock if you're really into that. I don't know if you are or not, but that's there's all these things you can put. So we now have your order placed on April 20th, 2020. Now, here's the next question for you guys. If I'm a customer and I'm going to go to Steve's Crazy Restaurant and buy my fancy apples, it told me what the line total was for each line. What am I missing for the whole order?
A total for the whole order.
Total for the whole order. So that sounds like a mini function to me, right? Right. So we need to create a variable that is the total of totals. Now, right now, we have an order array that is all of these things, but we haven't done any math to add up the how many times amount plus the other how many plus amount plus the other how many, however many items there are. So we need to create actually a new array for the total price. And we're going to create an empty array first, because you always create an empty array. And then before we join the order, actually, we don't have to do it there. We can do it in the how many. We're going to push into the total price. We're going to push that mini function that we already used for how many. Because we know that gives us the exact total per line item. And then we're going to log that. I'm going to turn off sending the emails for now, Melissa. I'm sure you don't want to get them. We're going to log our total price. And that'll help us determine how to make it tell us the total. Pull up our logs. Okay, so in our total, we have 11.0 and 43.6. Now, because we're going to be doing math on this, we don't need to worry about getting the two fixed 2 yet. We're going to put that on the end. So we need to figure out how are we going to make a total of that. And the what's called vanilla method of JavaScript is to do a loop. And as you remember, we do lots of loops. Loops are great. So what we're going to do is a new loop. And we'll call this one T for total. It doesn't matter. Whatever we want it to be. T is less than total price length. So all of the items in total price. And it's as simple as giving us our new variable is going to be var grand total equals total price index T plus grand total. Sort of a circular loop right there. Okay. Let's run that. View our logs. Who's got a calculator handy? I mean, I do, but you guys can't. Oh, not a number. What did I break on that? Oh. Forgot to put a mini function around total price to make it a number, and then times it by 1 to make it a number. Because remember, sometimes it doesn't believe it's a number. And view the log. Still broken.
You have to make the grand total a number too.
Probably. Let me actually grab this. Oh, yeah, you're correct, Melissa. So we're going to add this, make it 0. So it's a number. Good work now. Maybe? There we are. Thank you, Melissa. That was a good catch. It's always that identifying those numbers. Does that add up to our math, everybody?
Yes.
$40.60 plus $11 is $54.60, right? $54.60. So now we can go back to our email that we're sending our customer, and we can add that final total. So what we need to do is, let's say, I've got a couple line breaks, and I always do it this way so I know where my quotations are for strings. Your total will be quotation marks, so I don't lose my place, plus sign, and between them, I need to do a mini function of grand total to fixed. Just like we did before with the 2 fixed there, we're going to grab that and tack it after grand total and close it in a mini function. Okay. And we're missing a $sign before I forget it. All right, let's see what we send our customer now. Should be a delightful email by this point, and our customer will be super happy to have received it. Thank you for your order. Below is what we're preparing. Oh, no, this isn't the one. There it is, second one. Okay. M. Schuler, thank you for your order. Below is what we're preparing for you. 5 applesauce at $2.20 for a total of $11. 8 baked apples at $5.45 for a total of $43.60. Your total will be $54.60. Your order will be ready in 20 minutes. Pretty marvelous. Now, obviously, we don't normally call people by their email unless you're weird. So in our form, we might need to add something like, tell us your name. What is your name? And then we can add that data in there. But what it allows us to do, I'll just grab the responses in a spreadsheet. All of that information allows us to take very raw data that's in a spreadsheet and turn it into a very user-friendly, customer-friendly email, even though the data may be strings of text that don't look like you can do math on them and don't look like you can do fancy things with them, and allows us to generate the totals and everything. Because the data is still just raw data, what that means is that I can start to do things like look at how many applesauces I sold this month and filter it by the timestamp. I can look at what items get sold together frequently based on this spreadsheet. So as a business, we can actually start to drive data decisions based off of this information while still keeping the appearance of hand-typed emails and information going out to the customer. We only have a few minutes left today. So what questions do people have today? And you can unmute or you can chat. Can you put lines in boxes? Oh, and maybe a rainbow logo. As a matter of fact, Dan, you can. So when you go, let's go back to our reference sheet. So we go into the script, we go to help, we go to documentation, and we go to reference. One of the services, there's two different services that will send emails. One is Gmail. I never, ever, ever use the Gmail service directly because it doesn't, it does too much. We don't need that fancy, and it actually has a lower limit on what it can do. Whereas the mail app under script services allows you to do a mountain of things. So it has all these different options. And the one you're talking about, Dan, is sending an email with recipient, subject, body, and options. When you start talking about options, you can actually add HTML content using the HTML body item. So in this particular example, as I zoom in so you can see it, it has the name of a file, and then it has an attachment, file get as a PDF. So it attaches the PDF. It also allows you to add things like, what's some good examples? Images in line is what Dan's talking about. How do you add the rainbow? I'm sure you're all aware that I send out automatic happy anniversary emails to staff that have very pretty pictures in them, and this is exactly how that happens. Those send out as an inline image attached in the email. So you can simply declare your HTML body like any other HTML information and include your inline images, and it will send those out. If you go with an HTML setup, what I did today is pure text. This is as raw text as you can get. What that means, it is 100% universally accepted by any computer on Earth that can read English characters. If you go to HTML format, the end receiving device must be able to understand HTML. Most computers can do so, most smartphones can do so, but old dumb phones cannot, and certain other really, really archaic devices cannot read HTML. And so if you're going to use HTML, you can do anything you can do in HTML, Dan, like tables, borders, rows, headers, paragraphs, anything, including CSS. So the HTML body, you can make it as pretty as you want to, That said, it increases your script runtime. So if you're trying to send 1,500 emails in a day, it can actually eat up all your script service time, and it can slow down the process, but you're absolutely able to add those items. And the same with inline images. Inline images you can add fairly easily without a deficit in script time. Okay, any other questions today? Once again, thank you very much for lesson 3. Today we've learned how to send an email taking raw data and turning it into a user-friendly end result. We're going to do a little survey to see what we want to learn next week. Thank you very much. Have a great day.